Hello there, good people. Patricia here. Today we are finally getting to have another book talk, which I am super excited about because it's been a minute. I'm going to talk a little bit more in another video about goal setting and why it matters for yourself. But what I will say here is that I am proud of myself for sticking with my goals when it comes to several different projects that I'm working on, but particularly my reading goals for the year, only because it has been like tough for me in more recent years, just because there was so much going on. I was not doing enough for myself, and that included reading all these lovely books that I have. I buy them and collect them, which I'm fantastic at that. But actually sitting down to read some of them, especially some of the more difficult works, um, I wasn't doing. And so at the beginning of this year, I did decide I am going to do that. I found a reading challenge that I could vibe with. I made a few adjustments on how to make it work for me, and I dove in. And so things were going well and swell earlier a few months ago. Then there were some things to cause, things to go off rail. And I'm like, it's okay. And this book in particular that I literally had on my list for, I think it was the month of March, because it coincided with Women's History Month, and I thought reading something by Cecile Richards would was appropriate. And just because of some things that had gone on, I did not get it read during then. I was behind, and then I got further behind as more things with life just came up. And another thing about it that I'll get into why is I realized I was struggling with this book, not because it's a difficult read, not at all, but because it was kind of hitting a little close to home. And I had to recognize that for what it was and set it down. So a little bit about how to honor who you are, even in the moment when you're going through something that you enjoy and want to, but listening to yourself when something's like feeling a little off. And we'll dive into a little bit more about that. So, refresher on my challenge is I have chosen a list of anchor reads for the 12-month time period. And I chose things that were already on my shelves. That was my own personal challenge, is to pick from what I already had, and things that I've been wanting to read but hadn't actually, that maybe I'd started a little bit but never finished. So I chose those, I made the list, and then I kind of assigned them throughout the year. There's nothing particular about it. There were a few that I assigned, like I said, this one because of Women's History Month. The Obama books are set for the summer because, you know, the library opens in June. And so, just a little personal reasons why. And I also gave myself some time built in for, getting off track or whatever. And originally going with the goal of one per month in particular just was not like clicking. And then I realized like I don't have to do that. If my goal is to read, I'd chosen the 10 books. Um, then the goal was to finish them all by the end of the year, which when I did that, that calculated to reading 15, 20 pages a day. And miraculously, look at that. I did the math, which I'm not normally very good at, but I did the math and I was like, oh, you get through that. And so that's how I decided to approach reading these anchor books. Now, what that also means is that I decided, if I decide to pick up something else for fun or whatever, absolutely I can do that. But these are the ones that I decided I was committed to reading this year, and anything else would be, the whipped cream and cherries on top. So that's how I've approached my reading for the year. And we'll talk about, the adjustments I'll have to make because I have a couple that I haven't gotten to just because of some family health emergencies that came up. I had a graduation. So that literally took like a whole 3 weeks out of my regular schedule of how I approach things, and I'm not, but I'm not worried about it, which is saying a lot for me because old Patricia would be like, oh, you know, I'm like, but this is for me, like this is my own goal. I can adjust it as need be. A reminder to yourself that when it's your goal, you can adjust things as you need to and still honor yourself without beating yourself up about it. I know all the lessons that have nothing to do with the book itself, but it comes with the territory, right? Okay, so this book, I believe I bought probably at the Texas Book Festival, which I attend normally every year if I don't have a conflict that's unavoidable. And I buy books all throughout the year, but then there are some that I buy specifically during the festival because I'm there in person. A lot of times the person is there, not always, or they have a focus on authors from Texas, different things. So Cecile Richards, meets all of those things. She was just iconic, and um, this topic of make trouble and standing up, speaking out, and finding the courage to lead is so appropriate. Um, Definitely for her and her background, but for me and in our times that we are in right now. So it was a reminder, and it was like, you know what? I've had this book for a couple of years, had not read it yet. It's time. And so I did it. I started it. And I think what I will say that caught me a little off guard, because I guess it's been a minute since I've read a straight memoir slash biography. It's not really a biography. That's the piece that I was like adjusting to because it is written from her perspective. There's a co-author here, but it is written from her perspective. So I guess that makes it more of a memoir, and in her voice for sure. A little quick rundown is I actually knew Cecile Richards because I was a baby lobbyist and um, in the working around the Texas legislature during the time that she was on the come up herself. I think she's about 10 years. She was about 10 years older than me. And so I knew her. Um, there were projects that the various organizations I worked on with her when she was in when she had created the Texas Freedom Network. So that's the other reason why this book was a little nostalgic, dare I say, because I was like, I'm reading about from the perspective of someone that like I actually knew, right? Not just someone I heard of or admired, or just there was some distance. Like I had actual contact with this person in my career, and so it was really interesting to get a little inside glimpse on some things that I actually had experienced, some things that I forgot about, um, and recognize I'm like I was a part of that and causing me to rethink how I approach or reconsider some things as well, which I'll get into in just a second. So this was great. I love how she included, her time growing up, and of course her focus with her mother because Ann Richards is absolutely iconic in the state of Texas, the only female uh, to have served as governor, uh, only female and Democrat, I dare say, to have served as female Democrat, I should say, to serve in Texas government in, I won't say recent times because it was literally, what, 30 years ago, but more modern times. And the reminder, here's the kicker: I was an intern in Ann Richards' office twice, and she was only in office for one term for 4 years. And I realized when Cecile was talking about that, and got to that point in her life about how she was helping her mother with these various campaigns, when before she became governor and how that came about. And I was like, wait, I was there. I was there for this. I was an unpaid intern the first time because my mentor was looking for folks, young women, women of color, to bring in to the fold, which is completely aligned with what Ann Richards was doing during that time. And I was one of those people. And I realized, when Cecile talks about that in the book, I'm like, I was there. I was one of those people. And how I literally got my kickoff into the Texas legislature as a young college student, um, going over to Capitol, working, half time, part time, as an intern, and started from there. And then after that, I returned, maybe the following, not the immediate summer, but a year later after I'd gone to law school. So my first summer after law school, um, I was a paid intern full time in the office of the governor in the administration office. I will never forget that, with a wonderful woman named Virginia, who was the head who was the head of the administrative piece of the organization at the time. And that's where I learned how to where I learned about reading all of these um, constituent letters, drafting the letters to respond to them. All of those things I learned in that office, um, with Ann Richards as governor. And I'm kind of proud of those moments, and I was so happy to be able to reflect on them as I'm reading this book, and then taking things along for learning more about things that Cecile had done that I wasn't as aware of. Because I know when she moved on from Texas Freedom Network and was doing things, I didn't realize a couple of the moves she made in between there. And that was fascinating to learn about and to read about, to learn about how her own children followed in the footsteps of her and her mother when it came to politics, how tightly, how tight her immediate family was, her husband, the kids, and literally politics was their life, and it just worked for them. Now, the one thing about this, and I think this was that piece where I was like, oh, I wish there was a little more detail. But that's when I was like, no, she wrote this from a very particular perspective. It was not meant to be some tell all memoir biography thing. Like, it's not written from that perspective. It's written from the perspective of telling her life about how she came to be who she was. Um, and seeing it through that through line of advocacy, of uh, building up from a life that wasn't some, I mean, she became heir, I guess you'd say, after Ann Richards and all the things that she did, but she had her own full life of being involved as an advocate all across the country. That was the thing that was really surprising to me. I did not realize she had spent so much time zigzagging across the country as an organizer in the community for all types of different organizations. And so that I found fascinating to learn about and putting some depth behind it. And then there were those difficult moments, right? Because I knew it was coming as we're flowing through the story. And this is one of those moments where I was like, okay, I've got to put this down because I know what's coming next. And what's coming next was when she was going to have to talk about when her mother passed. And I I put it down before I could get to that chapter because I knew it was coming, and I knew I was going to like prepare myself, right? Because it was a passing of an era, and I felt that. And she handled it very well, I think, in the book. She talked about how her mother, still was a fighter till the end, and how she handled those things, and how she and the family circled around to help her and to make those things happen. But it was like I'm tearing up even now a little bit thinking about that, because again, like this is a time that I actually lived through, and lived with, right? I was here when all of this was going on. And so that was very interesting. It was a relatively short chapter, and uh, knowing the perspective from which she wrote the book, and by this time, kind of leaning into it, understanding like the, knowing she had to acknowledge it, right? And still knowing that also I imagine at this time that it was still just a very personal and deep part of her that's like could not be fully exposed, and I respect that, right? I loved reading about. I knew when she went to Planned Parenthood and was doing things, I did not know all the details of things, because by that time when she was doing that, I was lobbying out on my own. But then, even then, let's see, yes, I was out on my own by that time. And then I also was shifting more to policy and consulting, that was not legislative in nature. So I was a little more distant from things. Now, mind you, I was always keeping up with the politics in my state and around the country, because that's just who I am. That's who I've always been. And, you know, as much as I hate the politics that developed in Texas over the last 10 to 20 years, um, I'm still a legislative junkie, right? Even to this day, I still follow those things, but just not as closely on the inside. And unfortunately, with things that are going on, recognizing, oh, some of these things just don't change. They just get a little deeper and a little nastier, right? So there's that. And then also, I did not know what she had moved on to when when she decided to uh, retire from Planned Parenthood. What she did, what she was working on those last 6 years, and um, then that caused me to go do a little research, like who took over after her, what was that story, and how it fell to, and where they're working with it. So that was something that I was very mindful of, and it also reminded me again of another connection that I'd never really thought about when you're thinking about someone you actually know and reading their book and where you were in your life. And I remembered a visit of my own to Planned Parenthood while I was in law school, because I was in a whole other state. I needed an annual, checkup, and I didn't have a doctor in California. I didn't know, and because I was there technically for law school, which is somewhat temporary. And at that point, I also had decided I wasn't staying. I knew I was going to leave California when I graduated. But in any case, that was just another one of those touch points where I remembered. I'm like, I went when I learned that that was a service that they offered. I went to Planned Parenthood to get my annual checkups and women checkup things, at Planned Parenthood in California. And it was just like, yes, this was some of the things that she was advocating for during the time. And I actually utilized it, right, to remind people that there's so much more to the work that the organization did, and helped women who needed care at vulnerable times in their lives, um, beyond reproductive rights, uh, or reproductive care, but literally in some basic healthcare needs, where they could get support and directed to the right place and the right people. So anyway, that was another little lovely touch point that I enjoyed, coming to the realization of. And then, as I got towards the end, um, I realized, I was like, okay, when was this book written and finished? And it looked like it was written and finished in 2018, 2019, about the time that she, was leaving Planned Parenthood, but it also was written and completed 6 years before her own death. And that's when I had to work through because I was like, and because she, Cecile Richards passed away in January of 2025, um, on Inauguration Day in January 2025. I'm going to leave that there. I remember that. And I was just like, I got nothing else to say. And, um, you know, again, another remembrance that brought back to what a loss it was for her. She passed away of cancer. She had cancer. And just the power of her legacy that she left behind with her family, with the places where she worked and served, and her commitment to being an advocate, um, a strong one wherever she was. And it was just a reminder to me of the things that I do care about as well, which is being a strong advocate. And while my career focused on being an advocate in terms of education, and then getting burnt out on it just because of the politics here in Texas was just so frustrating. But learning that I could continue to be an advocate for women and children and the things that I care greatly about just in different spaces, this was a reminder to check back in with that, right? To stick with what I know, what I care about, and reviving it where it needs to be revived. Because yeah, things are going to get tough, and it's going to get exhausting, and it's going to get hard, and there are going to be hard losses along the way. I know this already. I've experienced that, and this book is a reminder of that, and how it's not about giving up even in those moments. You may have to set a step back, reset, and then be like, okay, what do we do next? And so, Make Trouble by Cecile Richards. I did enjoy it. I'm sad it took me so long to finish it, but I knew it was, it would happen in all the right moments. And I will be tapping back in on some things as reminders. I actually just read this book. When I read stuff and there are things, I will flag it a lot. I did not get into a lot of flagging. I think there are some moments where I did highlight a few things. But for me, it really was just letting myself experience the book and leaning into it. So that's another thing, right? Something I would normally do is like, oh, what can I, reference? It really wasn't that for me. It really was about, you know, listening and reading and experiencing it for what it was. And so I love it, uh, and recommend it if you're interested in getting a perspective on someone who was a strong advocate for what she believed in, came from a family of that, and how that carried through her entire uh, professional career and professional life. So there we are. I am moving on to the next set of books. I'm I'm a little torn about what I'm going to read next because I'm so close to the being the start of summer, which is when I plan to start the Obama books. Um, so I'm trying to decide if I'm going to go back to. There are two books that I didn't get to that are on my list. So I'm trying to decide if I'm going to do some overlapping, or I have a fiction book over here that I may just, finish off that's been kind of sitting there. And I'm probably going to go finish it. It's where I'm kind of leaning. I don't know yet. I've got time, so I will figure that out and share those updates with you as they come along. All right. I would appreciate if you would hit the thumbs up, the like button, and subscribe if you've enjoyed this content, and to follow me and this channel as we continue to explore those things that will help you to celebrate who you are in all the things and all the ways, as you and I look forward to going a little bit deeper on what it means to be a woman in these times who still has professional goals and desires and things to grow, um, who feel strongly about their connections and the relationships that they build, that I've built out over the years, how to be an advocate, um, as I've moved throughout my career and at this point in time in my life, what does that look like? And most importantly, or should I say, not the least of which is making sure to take good care of myself at this point in time and redefining what self care looks like, and leaning into that. So, if that is something that you can vibe with, then please hit the subscribe button. We cover a little bit of everything, as well as to share it out with others. Okay, I will put a link to some of the things that I learned about from this book in the notes, and would love to get your feedback if you've read the book or what are you reading right now. I'd love to hear about it. I love getting some fresh suggestions for what to put on the list moving forward. All right, take care, and we will see you in the next video.